I've been there for 2 months, April, May, June, July, 3 months. But prior to that, I was working at a property management in Ottawa, and I was by August. It would have been 2 years if I was still there till August. And then prior to that, I used to work at the store um, as a cashier briefly. And then prior to that, I was in tech in Nigeria. So a that's just showing you different paths till I got to where I am now. So I'll just talk about what I've learned about accounting and payroll over the last 2 years, how it applies, how to get into it, what it entails, and generally just that. Then we can answer questions and have conversations around the career, accounting and payroll. So payroll for most companies is in Canada is under finance. That's because payroll has to do with money. But payroll most time it's an intersection of HR and finance because it's the part where you have to balance the employees HR has worked on hiring and having them get paid by the finance team. So you're like at the middle. So most times you could fall either in finance or in HR. But in Canada, generally, most times it falls under finance. And over the last 2 roles I've worked in, it fell under finance. And so basically accounting, finance. Back to where I was. What's payroll basically? Payroll is it's not just the checks you see because most people just you get paid and they're like, oh, the payroll department process my pay, and you just see your pay. But then there's a lot more that goes into that. You see conversations around how people say, oh, I don't want to get into a particular tax bracket because I now get to be taxed more. In the past, I used to when I started working in payroll, I now started to engage those conversations to explain how it works. But I found out that okay, people would not still understand because they are not in it. And so when someone posts something like I got a bonus and 50% was taken off, it's not really like that most times. There's more to it that happens. And most times it's not really 50%. If it's a bonus, there's a different calculation and all of that about it. But most people just see what they get. They don't understand what happens behind. So while you're trying to get people paid, you also have to take note of the legislative part of it. There are laws that govern payroll. CRA is the main, let's say, that gives the major directive as regards payroll. CRA does the tax updates, gives the updates as regards how taxes should be calculated, as regards how EI should be calculated, as regards how CPP should also be calculated. They also determine the income brackets. And so everybody processing payroll in Canada has to wait for them for their yearly updates because they make all of these rules that guide how you get paid. Then also, to work in payroll, you have to be a trusted source because every information you give affects somebody's life. Every information you impute affects somebody's life one way or the other. For example, you make a mistake that affects the final pay of the month, maybe it's the last pay of the month or on the last day, maybe, and someone's rent is due the next day, and you make just one mistake. You've affected somebody's life. Maybe his bank is trying to debit him, they are unable to debit him, and then eventually he has to pay NSF or it's and then he reaches out back, what happened with my pay? And then you explain. Your explanation would not solve it because you've affected someone's life. So all of that is part of what comes with payroll. So many people that work in payroll or that have worked in payroll, most times they either started out as account payable clerks, accounts receivable clerks, bookkeepers. So generally, I tell anybody that if you've done anything that's related to accounting, you're already one step in with payroll. It's almost the same. The difference is just the laws or regulations you now have to follow. But then it's still accounting. It's still calculation of money. It's still charts of accounts and the rest that have to do with accounting. And so account payable, basically, those account payable is generally a company trying to make payments, a company's record of people they owe, invoices, and all of that. So account payable is the money you pay out. Accounts receivable refers to the monies you're trying to receive. All of it's accounting, and every company has an account payable department and an account receivable department, except it's a really, really small company where they do all of the accounting themselves. But if they employ an accountant, the person is probably doing all of it. So for some companies, you see someone that is working both as accounts receivables, account payable, bookkeeper, payroll officer at the same time, because all of these processes are intertwined and they are very similar. They just have different laws depending on which of them you are, you know. Um, People that would easily thrive in payroll if you are detail driven. With payroll, you are concerned with every detail involved. So someone sends you an email and says, I want to resign June 29, for example. You can't set it as June 30. You can't set it as June 28. If the person says June 29, if anything eventually happens and it has to do with that date, that small change you made could cause problems. So you need to make sure you check every information employees supply to you to update maybe their bank account, for example. It's really, you just really have to pay attention to a lot of details when you work in payroll. And then you're dealing with numbers. One 8 9 that you change to 9 8 is an entirely different calculation. And then eventually you would work with Excel. You make a mistake in a formula, it's gone. But then if you're someone that pays attention to details, gradually, if there's a change in what it used to be, you could easily catch it. Discreet, you'd see everybody's salary. I remember the first job I used to work them, and then I saw somebody's bonus pay. I didn't know when I carried phone to start texting my wife, and then I found out that okay, not that I found out. I knew it was not exactly how it should be, but then I just thought that I saw something really crazy now, and basically that's it, because you would see a lot. You would see everybody's pay. Currently, I work in the Ottawa hospital, for example. I see the CEO's pay, I see whoever's pay. So you have to learn how to be very discreet. It's not conversations you have with people. The highest people you should have those kind of conversations with will be people that you work in the same team with, the same team payroll, not just in the company. Come under deadlines. Payday doesn't move. You can't change the payday. The payday is the payday. And there are regulations around it. If you miss somebody's payday, there are laws around it. So there are deadlines. You can't shift it. For example, you can't say I have a vacation coming up and I won't be able to process payroll. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to find a way around it. Like, for example, I had to travel last year for 2 weeks and I was the only payroll officer in the company I used to work. But then I found a way around having to process pays way in advance and then explain to everybody that adjustments will be made in the next pay. But then I gave heads up properly and everybody in the it was a smaller company, they understood they understood what was happening and they were going to get their regular pay. But with deadlines, it doesn't change. Pay must be processed on a particular day. You miss it, if you miss it, it's trouble. There's no I can fix it. No, there are deadlines, there are deadlines. I'm curious about rules. The tax table updates regularly, but as much as you can be up to date with it, with new payroll software now, you don't necessarily have to do a lot when the tax table updates. I've worked with the payroll software where it was basically very localized. It was you install the app on your system, and so if there's a tax update, the payroll software sends you a software update that you run that helps you. So the tax update is not really something you have to do, but then you have to know it because employees will ask you questions. Oh, why my salary used to be net $2,000, then suddenly I'm seeing net 2001. Why are you guys overpaying me now? What's happening? Or maybe it was when the tax tables changed. Maybe you've maxed out your CPP. Maybe you've maxed out your EI. So you need to know all these things so you're able to respond to employees. So generally, there are two major certifications in Canada for payroll. And I always tell everybody, you don't need a certification to get a job, but you need it to understand your job. So as much as you could have all of the knowledge you read online, there's something about going through this certification that helps you. So even if you don't eventually take the final exam, if you get all the materials and you read it well like you should, most people don't, but then if you read it well like you should, if you need to write the exam, you would have to read it. And then it's not as crazy as whatever. I once worked as a cashier in Nigeria in Access Bank when I was just out of uni then, and I had a manager that used to tell me that many of these accounting processes that people do, you just need to train somebody. As much as people go into school to learn, you can learn many of the processes that apply to your current role within to 6 months, and you are good. If it's just that current role you are, and then you can gradually grow on it with time. So I did the PCP last year, which I registered for it. I think 5 months into my first payroll role, and then gradually I finished at the end of the year. I had not done accounting in my life before, so I had to do an accounting course with in George Brown and for that. But eventually I got certified. And then the next one is the PLP, which takes, so all of why I said is most times it's preferably you get a job first before, is because you also need 1 year of experience that you have to prove um before you get the certification for the PCP. So I did it last year. As at August last year, was 1 year in payroll in that company, and so I was able to. I was already midway through it as at then. I had just one more course and the transfer of credit, so I did that at the end of last year. And basically, that's it. Then PLP. Once you're already a payroll person, within 5 years, you should be able to strive to get that also. So I just came up with a 60-day prep that I similar to something I had used. Yes, it has to be in Canada because the certification is for Canada. The question I just saw that I don't know if there are other questions, but that one just popped up on my screen. That's why I answered it. Yes, it has to be 1 year experience in Canada, and it has to be you doing actual payroll because they're going to there's a work experience form that you have to fill, and then you detail the things you've done according to that. They will give you a list of things regarding payroll and write how many percent of your monthly task is assigned to all of that. And then somebody in the company has to also sign and attest that, okay, truly you've been working here for the last number of months or years you put there. Okay, so this is basically what I did. April, May, June, July. It took me 4 months, but for some, it could take you less because the person that actually introduced me to payroll, it took her less than a month to land a payroll job. And since she landed a payroll job in April, she told most of us, and then we got into this was April 2024. Most of us got into it, and everybody has basically been fine. I don't like to overstate it, but then I mean, some of us have lost jobs in between, not me, but they've always gotten something else less than a month after. Okay, back to where I was. Learn and practice. So you basically have to read if you want to get into payroll because payroll interviews are not interviews that you go into without having no knowledge. You need knowledge about it. You need knowledge about what you're talking about, but then you don't need in-depth. So, for example, nobody's going to tell you to take a calculator to calculate salary and say maybe the person's gross is blah blah blah. What would be the net? Nobody will ask you that in an interview. But eventually, when you go through that PCP training, you will know. So, literally, practically, I can give me any person's gross salary, tell me all the things that has to do with his pay. I can use book and bio to calculate what your net salary would be. But then in the beginning, you don't need all of those plenty details. Have an idea of how, okay, from gross, what do they deduct from gross? They deduct CPP first, or they deduct AI first. Does the person have RSP? If you have an idea of how that process works, gradually you are starting to understand it. There's a T4 2001 employer guide that covers all of the things that guides CRA and payroll and employers and how they should process payroll. You don't have to know it in depth, but then a summary, one or two interview prep questions, and you'd understand the kind of questions they ask. On YouTube, you could get videos of Ceridian, Dayforce, ADP, QuickBooks to just see how payroll works. QuickBooks is not a payroll software. I was going to talk about that later. I'll still talk about payroll software and what QuickBooks is later. And prepare a resume. Rewrite your resume around payroll keywords. There are many keywords with payroll that has to be on your resume, especially if they are scanning with all of these AI software and stuff. T4, year end, ROE, biweekly pays, process, time cards, time sheets. So many of those buzzwords are usually good to be on your resume because it gets you selected. Enroll and apply. So by the time you've decided you want to do payroll, because I like to tell people that it's a decision you have to make. If you don't see it as I've decided I want to, it might be tough because you have to put in the work of applying for jobs, refining your resume, you really have to, you get into interviews, you'd be rejected multiple times, especially when it's your first time. Even if it's not your first time, I've had interviews where I was rejected even after I had worked in payroll for a long time. Usually second stage interviews and all of that. But at that point, you are ready. Once your resume is good, you start to, the moment you get your first interview call back, just know you are ready. Don't waste time. And you've made up your mind, just go and register for the MPI. Start your PCP course if you can. Once you get your first interview call, it means your resume has started to pass the test, and then gradually you would make sense. So I wrote a few things. This is what I was speaking about your resume, the kind of buzzwords that you put in your resume. The last part I said 1 page. Usually it could flow into 2 pages, but then it has to be proper content. If you are putting experience on your resume, don't just put because you want it to be long. It has to be proper context. You don't have to always repeat the same thing across the different companies you put on your resume. I did this here. I also did this here. The system is going to pick one. There's no point repeating all of that. There. Every other thing I think I've spoken about your resume, what buzzwords that should be there. Yeah. This is basically 3 questions that most times come out in every payroll interview, which is one of the basic things you should know prior to going for any payroll interview. They ask you to walk them through gross to net calculation. Like I said earlier, they're not actually going to ask you to do manual calculations. They are just going to ask you to give them an overview. Gross earnings, statutory deductions, other deductions, and the net pay. It's basically as direct as this. This is when you want to show that you know too much or you just want to really impress them. When I go for interviews and I want to impress them, I start to talk into more details. Okay, this is what the CPP rate is for this year. This is what the EI rate is for this year. This is the maximum EI contribution for all of those things are extras that eventually you would get into. But then generally for most interviews, when they ask you this question, you just give them this as direct as this and you are good. When an employee says their pay is wrong, what do? They expect you to show empathy and they expect you to investigate. So you use your words to explain how you would do that. Somebody has complained about a problem. The first thing everybody expects you to first do is to show empathy. When you show that, you then ask questions, you try to be in their shoes, you understand what you try to understand what went wrong, and then you tell them how it can be fixed. When it has to do with pays, it has to be as quick as possible, especially if the fault comes from you. If it comes from the employee, you can still maneuver them and say, oh, on the next pay, we'll fix it for you. But then if it comes from you, you have to fix it as quick as possible. That's why sometimes you have off-cycle pays to just fix an error. How do you stay current with legislation? You tell them MPI and CRA because that's like the single source of truth is CRA. MPI feeds off CRA, but MPI would break it. MPI is the National Payroll Institute. They'll break it down for you to understand how it relates to your payroll, basically. But then similar. They send, currently the payroll, the national payroll seminar is actually going on this weekend in Montreal. I'm not there because I cannot afford it. It's too expensive. Where to learn payroll.ca, CRA. Every different provinces have different laws. Minimum wages differ across provinces too. Student minimum wages too are different, and so you have to know all of these things. ESA is Employee Standard Act. There are different laws regarding everything an employee does, and one of the beautiful thing about these times is AI. There's basically no question you ask me on payroll. If I don't know it, I'm with ChatGPT trying to find answers. I'm on CRA's website trying to find answers, and then you can see an answer to almost everything. But at the beginning, when you're trying to get in an interview, you wouldn't have time to check all of those things. But eventually, you don't have to cram many things. I don't have to cram what the tax brackets are, for example, and all of that. Okay. I'm not saying you must. I wish I could see the charts on the side. I don't know. It's been so long that I used Zoom. Where's chat? Okay, this is chat. Are you still
it's because you are sharing your screen share.
Yeah. Are you saying one must land a payroll job before writing the professional? Okay, I'm not saying that, but I advise it. This is why. It's a commitment. You need to be sure you are ready for it. It's not something you start and just quit. It doesn't make any sense. So the moment you are sure, register for it. I got a job before I did, but I know people that did it first. I've passed my PCP. I'm looking for a first payroll job. Your own conversation is entirely different from this call. Yes, we could have a conversation eventually, but yeah, you would get a job. You have your PCP. I don't. You will get a job. We'll come to that. There are other factors that affect getting job, location, and all of that. But then I could answer some of these questions in the Q&A. Okay, so back to this. ADP, Dayforce, Workday demos. They have demos on YouTube that explain many of how their software work, and you can see how it works. So aside from payroll software, I'll mention a list of some that I know. There are accounting software that you would have to work with. Like I said, payroll is accounting. You have experience in accounting for circle. You are ripe. You are more than ripe for payroll, but I'll come to that. I mean, you are ripe for more than payroll. You could get accounting jobs too, but then I'll come to that later too. There are a list of accounting software that every company uses, because as you are processing pay, which HR has given you, probably giving you this person's salary, this is what this person wants as deductions and all of that. As you are processing it, you also have to tell finance that I've processed this pay and this is how much they are going to debit the company. This is how much they're going to debit the company for the employees' net pay. This is how much they're going to debit for RSP. This is how much they're going to debit for EI, for both the employee and employer contribution. Same thing for CPP. So all of that is Bukola, we have an idea what that is. That those are GL entries basically. So you have to enter all of those entries into the GL after every pay. Now, this is me explaining like you do end-to-end of payroll. Currently, I work with the Ottawa Hospital and I don't do all of that anymore. I do way less. The task I do in a day, they are not, how do I put it? It's not as serious as where I used to work before that I was paying lesser because I was standalone there. But currently where I am, we're about 16 in the payroll team. I don't do as I probably deal with just very few a part of payroll processes, not all of it like I used to in the past. And so yeah, after this is just for me to answer questions. So I think I'll just go on with um Bukola first. You've passed the PCP and you're looking for your first payroll job. The first
Yeah.
thing I really ask to see first is your resume. Secondly, have you ever gotten interviews?
No, but I've been getting interviews because I currently run as an accounting coordinator for the company I work currently. But I've been getting jobs for senior accountant role, and they kind of asked me chip in if I do payroll, which I just said yes, but I don't do payroll.
Yeah. Um, Payroll is you could learn if you've done PCP, you already have an idea of how it works. You've
Okay,
probably not
perfect.
the practical experience, but trust me, if you've done PCP in 1 week, you understand end to end what you have to do. Now, this is depending on the company's payroll software. So, really large organizations use PeopleSoft or a Microsoft. It has to be something very robust, something enterprise. Is usually those ones could take longer to understand their processes because they have different moving parts. For the payroll software, they're probably doing their time and attendance with a different type of software entirely. It could be UKG or anything to get their time cards into the system. But generally, in 1 week or in 1 week you could master what you have to do. So we might have to review your resume again and also discuss hiring processes. Okay, one of the things I missed out of my slide is if you work in accounting, one of your biggest targets when you're trying to look for a job are recruiting firms, recruiting companies. They are your they are always looking for accounting people or accounting employees for someone. They are always looking for most times. And it's easier when the recruiting companies present your resume than when you go yourself for most of these roles because many of these companies feel like they don't have the time to do rigorous interviews and they believe the recruiting companies will do it well for them. And then once you are already in the pool of the recruiting company, they put out your resumes for most every of the job roles that you might fit into. So you are not directly applying to one job role at this point. You're expecting a call from the recruiting company at any time for any other role that becomes available. Any question? Again.
Yeah. Uh, would it be okay if I send my resume so you can help me review it? Because I don't know if I'm overdoing it or like if I need
Uh,
to pipe
yeah,
low on some things because I also
good.
have my CPA going on. So like I feel sometimes I got an interview and I was given the challenge that I'm overqualified. So I had to like take down some things. Like
Uh, I don't know why you want to do payroll if you're already going for a CPA, but
I let me buttress on that. Sorry. I want to go into payroll. At least I want to have something to back up. CPA is not something so easy to like finish. I'm international trained, yes, but it's it's challenging. So in the meantime, before I even sit down to fully say I want to fully write the CPA, I want to have something, another degree to push up myself, bump up myself, to see myself do something a little bit different, like hands on, apart from just the pure full cycle accounting, pay, full cycle accounting, APAR, reconciliation, general ledger. I also have audits, but I'm doing my full cycle plus audits here in my company, but I'm not moving forward. Like I'm
no,
not saying a salary bump up, I'm not saying, but I use all my Nigerian expertise as per an auditor to work, but I don't see myself moving forward.
um, okay. This while this call is not exactly to have that kind of conversation, but then you could job up. That's like one of the best ways if you feel like there's no movement within where you're currently working. I'll give an example of myself. I was doing payroll in the company I used to work with. I was really good. Everybody loved me. There's a part I don't want to talk about on this call because I don't know everybody. But then I think I spoke to banks then when I got the new offer. I knew that that company I couldn't move forward again. Like I knew, Olayinka, I can see you. Just let me finish, please. I knew that that company, there's no way forward for me there. The next role would probably be an assistant controller or a controller, and there was no way I was going to attain all of that if I did not go deep into accounting. I knew I didn't want to get that deep as at then. The next thing I needed to do was to get a new job. And so while I moved into a new job where I don't do as much task as I used to do before. I got a better pay because it was a bigger company with more staff, and then many of the tasks were a bit segmented. So if it's about the job, you might have to look for something new and move. I'm not against changing jobs. I love to change jobs. But then we know how Canada is, and many of these you can't be putting one month on your listing. But then your case, you've probably been there for a while. You could move. But then learning payroll too is good. You could still keep applying for. But then if your intent was just because of growth, job open is a better option than trying to learn payroll for good because payroll roles also have salary bands where you also eventually have to move into something else. I don't know if you get me.
I do, but I want to also have that as an experience, and so trust me, it goes a
Yeah.
long way too.
Yeah. Okay. Nelly, after Nelly, I was responding online. Can you help us that are looking to get into resume template, especially just coming from HR in Nigeria? Yes, I would share a template with banks that should be able to share with you that I currently use. It's not exactly a template, it's going to be it's some parts of my resume. I'll just take off some key information about me from it and share. Olayinka, you can ask your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So my question is that for my own case, because back home I started as a cashier just like you do, and also moved to finance, work in different departments, budget and planning, costs, publishing, reporting, and the like. So when I got here, it was a bit difficult getting that particular role. So I'm trying to switch. And to my surprise, I only got an invite for interview maybe like twice. In fact, there's an instance whereby I got an invite and I was told that I'm overqualified and eventually I lost that role. But since then, that was around 2024, thereabouts, or late 2020, early 2025. I've not gotten another interview. Yes, I've been working with some recruiters that I met on LinkedIn and some people that I've come across. Some even asked me to submit my resume, which I did, but eventually I just got information that your resume was not selected, even when we work with recruiters. So my question is, how do you balance it, or is it based on at times when I do it on my own, I feel like I couldn't get an invite for an interview. Even when you work with recruiters, also who have your resume, yet you still don't get an invite for interview. Your profile is not selected. So I don't know where is the missing link is. I don't know what the
Okay.
problem is. So that's why I wanted to
Uh,
have.
okay. Like I said earlier, if you get interviews, it means your resume is not entirely bad. So you probably might need to tweak your resume a bit more, and also location could matter. Um, I'll give an example. I live in Ottawa, and
I'm in Toronto.
you are in a brilliant location. I was going to compare Ottawa and Toronto and to give you a huge difference. Um, I've been applying to jobs even while I was working my previous job. I tried to apply that. Like most times, I get interviews, but then I most likely won't pass the second stage, or because eventually they start to ask for some things that I don't have that I cannot explain. So when they start to ask questions around some specific software and they talk about implementation of those software, obviously you can't lie your way through some of those things because
Mm.
many of them did implementation, all of that. And then I didn't see so much opportunities in Ottawa like I was seeing in Toronto. I have
Mm.
two friends that live in Toronto. I spoke to Banks about one of them recently, just before the post of this went up and all. They've changed jobs at least 3 times in the last 2 years in Toronto. They basically come and tell me that, oh, this or that job, something happened, they are leaving. I'm like, oh yeah. And then the following week or 3 weeks after, something else pops up. You have to take it like a job when you're applying for jobs. It's not LinkedIn sent you a recommendation, then you apply. The time once LinkedIn is sending you a recommendation for a job, just know some many people have gotten that. That's the time you're getting it. Some other people have also seen it before you. And then
Mm.
when you apply to that job again at that time, the chances of you getting it is now extremely slow because they've already gotten tons of resume. Your resume is just one of the many. While you might have a good resume, if they're trying to recruit for just one person, they probably might tell themselves that we need just 5 good resumes, and then we'll interview those 5 people and we'll screen to 3, and from the 3 we'll pick one. So they go into their pool of resumes. Your resume is brilliant, it's very good, but you had applied late or whenever, but then they just did not pick your own. Not
Sorry,
because it was
even when you work with recruiters, because at times I get a lot of recruiters saying, send me a resume and it's urgent, can you do this now? Yes,
yes.
which I do, but still don't get selected. That's my concern.
Okay. I'll give you another example. Yes. That's very possible. I'm not saying all of these scenarios don't happen. I'm just saying things that you could tweak that could help. So even those recruiters, if you're not getting job interviews when you've gotten to recruiters and the recruiters that are asking you continuously to submit your resume, you might have to work on your resumes again.
Mm.
Did your recruiters sit with you to work on your resume?
No.
Okay. So for some of them, they sit with you and they discuss your resume before
Mm.
they push.
Mm.
Okay, so I've worked with Hayes and I've worked with Altis. Yes, I was trying to remember the second one. Both jobs I got were from recruiting companies. Though I've had people, for example, my wife got a accounting job directly with the company. She had applied directly to them and she got a job. It was an accounting job also. She has been in accounting way before me. I was the one that just joined after I got to Canada. So yeah, we might have to look into your resume again, have some back and forth, sit down with some AI software to do some tweakings. And then when I said you take it like a job, you really have to take it like a job.
Mm.
You sit down with job posts and you have a resume for every job you apply to. It might seem tough,
But that's the
but
way.
that's the way.
Mm.
So initially, like I said, I used to work a store job. I did a store job for about 6 months. I lost weight.
Mm.
I lost weight. This was me that was chilling in Nigeria before I came here. I was so sure I was going to get, and that was my catalyst. I was like, if you can do it, you can do it. So I sat down and it became a job every every day. I would apply to as I don't set target of at least 10 jobs. I applied to every job I saw.
Mm.
That was I'm saying it, I'm applying because I knew my story needed to change at that time. I was not in a good place. Right. I mean, I still had a Nigerian job I was working online, but then, of course, the money will not translate.
Follow.
So I needed to get something here. And then I was supposed to add salaries to this slide, but I chose not to put it because I don't want anybody to quote me. Salaries most times range from 45,000 to about 90,000 for entry level. Depends on the company, depends on the scale of the business. Because I remember the first job I desperately tried to get was 45,000. I was rejected. Eventually, I got a better one, but I knew how I felt that day for that kind of salary, just because of how badly I needed a job.
Mm.
But eventually, I got something way better. But just saying, there's a range usually, and then most times, most roles are on site, and it has to do with the confidentiality of the information you are working with. Some of them are not just comfortable with you working from home because of the information you are working with. In short, the company I'm working now, you need a serious approval. Your manager cannot even approve for you to just work from home. You need an approval from senior management for you to work from home if you are in payroll because of the confidentiality of the information you have access to. All right.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You are welcome. Any more questions?
Okay, sorry, before I go, for the resume now, I might need to work with the recruiter. Are you saying I need to work with somebody
No,
else?
I need to share sample of what mine looks like. I'm going to get resumes of my friends too that are in payroll that have switched jobs well. I'll get their resumes, get mine, and I'll share all of those different templates, and you would see all of that. Can you help us that?
Sorry, Adela. Before you go, can you share if you have like a plain one? Because I didn't like do registration, so I don't really know a lot of people that are here. So even if you send your resume like later, I probably okay. Maybe I should put my number down. If I put my number down, maybe that will help so that when you
Oh,
share the something I can get with them. So yeah.
okay. All right. Ola, I'm listening.
Thank you, Diola, for the presentation. So, could you mind recapping that part you mentioned about transitioning into payroll?
The person she's living with told her that there's a career path that many people don't really consider, but it's one of those jobs where people say things like you can work anywhere, because literally you can work anywhere if you're in payroll, because almost every other company needs a payroll officer or needs someone that understands payroll. And so I started to apply for jobs. But then I was getting a few, maybe one call back. Of course, I was new, so I would answer questions like I think they're right, but many times I was saying a ton of bullshit. And one of the crazy things about Canadian recruiters is you are saying a ton of bullshit. They're just smiling with you, so you don't know if you said nonsense or not. But then a day or two later, you get the email that, of course, you did not go through with the first stage. But what I now did was those different interviews started to make me understand. That was how I came up with these questions, because these are the questions they always asked, and many times this second question is an example of a scenario-based question, so they could give you different scenario-based questions. So that period, what all I was doing while getting ready for whenever this job was going to come was to read and prepare for interviews. Any interviews coming, I'm preparing, working on my resume. But what was the game changer for me eventually was taking it as a job to look for a job. So I took it as a job. I mean, all this while, I was juggling a lot of things. I mean, you could have a job currently, but then if you don't pay as much attention into getting a new one when you really want it, it might not be as easy as you expect it to be. So then I was working the store job where I was working as a cashier. I was me juggling all these many things at the same time. But then I couldn't also keep working as a cashier because I should not be working there at that time. So eventually I got the one I eventually got. But then the game changer was taking it as a job to apply for a job. It's a job. If you want it, they are jobs. So you see many times tweets come out, and then I've quoted banks multiple times or something. Tweets come out, people talk complain about jobs. I always repeat, there are jobs. There could be other factors that affect it, like maybe your visa category and all of that, but there are jobs. Where jobs are, there are jobs. People are changing jobs in the middle of all this recession and employment. Okay, employment is increased recently, but then the jobs earlier this year. People are still changing jobs irrespective. So I believe if people are changing jobs, you can change. Any more questions? All right.
Yeah, I got a question though.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentation, anyways. And my question generally is just on the parts of having to register for PCP, the cost implication for that. I know you didn't really break down on that, like the starting process, what you need to do, how many exams would you have to take, and the process to qualify as a PCP professional. Just wanted you to shed more light on that. Then secondly, just wanted to speak on, AI itself. Do we see AI, taking parts of most jobs that have to do with payroll, like in the nearest future? Because there's a buzz around this payroll is a big thing. People should go into payroll, but not sure about, AI's parts, taking so much jobs in like people who are going into payroll, because we most of us are not just looking into like the future and how AI would affect payroll. So we are not just switching careers and like just going into payroll, yeah, because payroll at this point it's like it's the big thing. People are going into it, and yeah, there are good pay that comes with payroll, because I have someone that started payroll like in, I think, same time you did, 2024, and she has transitioned into two jobs. In fact, at this point, it's more like payroll is not even doing the work anymore. She's actually trading. She has stopped, yeah, doing payroll. She's trading at this point. But yeah, she has gotten, the PCP license. She has the experience. She can always move. People that do payroll too, they'll tell you that there is a long-term growth in it. You could get to managerial positions where you would even earn, six figures, things like that. Yeah. But just looking at the part that, yeah, AI is doing a whole lot, at this point in time, do we see AI taking a lot of jobs in payroll, or do you see payroll as a thing that, AI can never replace?
Okay. So I'll start with the PCP question, then I'll go to AI. So the PCP, there are different. There are three courses for PCP, but there are different learning modes. There are two different learning modes. There's a classroom model. It's an online classroom, but that model is where you have weekly classes. Somebody explains everything to you. You have a tutor, you have classmates, you have assignments, you have midterm exam and final exam. That's the classroom model. While the other model is like a self-taught model. You get all the materials, go and read, and then come and write your exam. There are practices for both. You can always practice before you write your exam. But those are the two. Either you pick the classroom or you go and read on your own and write. The first one I did was the classroom, and I enjoyed it, but it was slightly more expensive than the self-taught model. So the classroom, sincerely, I cannot remember how much I paid, but I think it was, except I checked now, it was around $700, $733, I think, for one course. Now, eventually, I'll explain why. When I was saying get a job first, I'll tell you why. So I did those three courses. Then I eventually went to George Brown to do the third one because you need to have done an introduction to accounting course. So if you've done any introduction to accounting course, even if it was when it was in Nigeria university or anywhere, as long as you can evaluate it with West. If it's not done in Canada, you'd have to evaluate it to West to send it to them so they can see the courses. You do a course by course evaluation for it if you want to. But if you've not done any accounting course, you can do an online accounting course with George Brown, or there are many university colleges. What is George Brown College? Is a polytechnic, is in Toronto, I think. You can do it in any one, but I did it in George Brown because it was cheaper. I think it was around $317. One course, 12 weeks, 300 and something dollars, I think. But the three core courses were around $700 each. Now, one of the reasons I mentioned that I always advise you get a job is because of that level of commitment. You're about to commit almost $2,500 into this thing. But the good part is if you work with a good company, you get a good job, they will refund. So every money I paid for my PCP, I got it back. Now, for some companies, they only pay you when you pass. I failed the second course once. That's if you are writing the exam, we could discuss about that. But there was a reason I failed the second course. And then when I was going to rewrite, because I had to pay again, I did the following month again. My company covered the cost again. Not every company will. So most companies will say when you pass, we'll pay. But luckily for me, I worked with a company that paid for even my membership fees. So everything I paid for payroll, the company covered it. And every year they were going to keep paying my NPI. The new company I've joined now, they even have an organization account on NPI, National Payroll Institute, where they cover the cost for that. So that's my answer for as regarding the PCP cost. Then AI. Some months ago, I had this conversation with somebody, and we spoke about AI and payroll and what does the future look like for it. One thing I would never say is that AI can never take over anything, because there are many things we are seeing happen now that if you thought about it 7 years ago, you would doubt the possibility. But these days we are seeing it happen. But then I'll give an example with coding and everything. There's a buzz around Claude AI building this and that and all of that. But you still see top financial institutions, they've not fired the head of their IT, they've not fired their software developers. I mean, some people are doing large retrenchment and all of that. And it's because eventually to get to a point where you also have to stand out as a person before AI will take your job. Someone has to be there. As much as people are implementing AI into many things, someone has to be there to control that AI. So now that point is left to you to. So AI is not going to take over payroll at least in the next 10 years. I am almost 100% sure of that. Almost. Because somebody has to key it in. Payroll is as delicate as AI taking over the back end of a financial institution. It has to go through a lot of screenings. It has to go through a lot of processes. But yes, would you need AI to stand out? Yes. I'm not bragging right now, but there are many things I used to do at my previous company that used to make them think I was a genius. Because I started to suggest ideas. ChatGPT was doing a lot of things for me. I can't write a single line of macro on my own on Excel. Like a single line of macro on Excel, I can't. But if I show you what I have done with AI and macros on Excel, you go bust your head. So I feel like same thing for every other career with AI. You have to stay relevant. As much as it seems like AI is changing a lot of things, you also need to learn how to make AI make you stand out. So I'm not going to say AI will not take over or not. I mean, we never know. But you have to make yourself stand out. At the moment, can AI do it? No, we still need human beings. Some people, there are bits of AI in almost every modern payroll software. There are bits of AI in different parts of it that do. Even on Microsoft Teams, where I currently work, we use AI to generate do audits for terminations and the likes. Yes, but it is you that needs to make yourself needs to make yourself useful or more responsible. Yeah.
Right, thank you very much. That was quite insightful. And lastly, just to say, I'm currently doing a payroll course, and I'm just putting it out there for you, just in case there are any openings at your place of work or anywhere you come across. I wouldn't mind you sharing, those openings to myself. Okay,
All
I
right.
could drop my contact, or you could drop your contact, in the chat box, so we could reach out to you for those who would love to.
All
Thank
right. No
you.
problem. Sure. We can have conversations around that eventually. I don't mind helping out with that if I get openings. There's actually an opening in my where I currently work, but then it's a very large organization, so it's not like I exactly have an input into it. Someone was laid off very recently, a payroll officer. It's called payroll advisor where I work. And so even when they posted it, they told us on the team, oh, we've posted the opening because of the stress on the team, because one person is now out and all of that. But yeah, but I think that opening should have been closed yesterday. So if I see any more, I would share. For many companies, they don't leave their openings open for long because they don't want a lot of resumes for them to deal with. Because I think as at the first day, they're already seen about 50 resumes or so. That's what I was explaining about not applying early. On the first day, my manager was like, "Oh, we've seen this amount needs to be muted." Also, I tell people that if you've gone months and months and applied to the same set of companies and you've not gotten a response, you might need to change your email or a part of your name. There is a huge possibility you've been flagged. So I'll give an example. My manager was saying, oh, they've gotten this amount of resumes. And then he made a statement. Oh, those set of names they have applied again. We'll skip those ones and move to the next. So of course, you already know some people that they always see. So those kind of people, even if they've upgraded their resume, maybe they've gotten better, they've learned more, they might still not be considered because they already knew. I'll give you an example of myself. A payroll, whatever. I did an application to those same guys, same email, same phone number, different resume. The HR called me and said, we have your email on the system, but it's for this profile. And they told me what my profile was. I dropped the call immediately. And that day was the day I changed my email and my first name. And then, eventually, but you get my point. You could have been flagged. It could be anything. Someone was raising up.